Okay, welcome back to part 2 of our multi-part series in integrating GitHub into Unity for 2D or 3D game development. In our first video, we walked through how to create a Unity project, create subfolders in our main assets folder, add the GitHub plugins and extensions, and get things really ready for integration. At this point, we should have a GitHub tab located over here on the right where the inspector is normally located. If you do not have that tab, you're going to want to go up to the window menu and click on GitHub. Again, we said in the first part that prior to integrating GitHub into Unity, you're going to want to make sure that you have a GitHub account, that you have installed the Git software onto your desktop computer. You have already created a Unity account and have it set up. So those were the prerequisites. So what we want to do now is you probably have a button somewhere in this area here that says initialize a Git repository. I clicked on it so that I could look ahead a little bit and be prepared, so it's not visible on my screen. But if you have that button right here, go ahead and click on it, and then you will see some GitHub buttons that are now available, because we installed GitHub in the previous video. So you can see we've got a section that says changes. We've got a section that says locks, which we could talk about in a future video. We've got any initial history. We've got branches, which we're going to talk about shortly. And then we have settings. We're going to want to go to the settings tab first. And in the settings tab, you should have your name typed up here and the email address that you signed up with on GitHub's website. Now it's going to want to know where is the repository for GitHub. Now you notice it says remote, so remote means it's not physically on our computer, it is located on GitHub servers. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch over to the web and go to our account and our project for our Unity tutorial. So you'll notice over here on the right in green, you should see a button that says clone or download. Clone means to make an exact copy of a repository. If you wanted to, take something you were working on at school or at work and make it available at home, you could take and clone that entire repository and work on it from home. What we're going to do is we're going to click on that button, and it says clone with HTTPS. So you can highlight and copy, or they've made it really easy to where you can just click on this little clipboard button and it will copy it to your computer's clipboard. We'll switch back over to Unity, and we will right click and paste it in there. And so now what this is going to do is it's going to tell Unity that when anytime we push our data from our local repository onto our remote repository, it knows where to go. Don't worry, we're going to talk about Git terminology such as repository, push, pull, and commit in just a second. One other option here is it's asking where your Git files are from your previous installation in part 1. That should already be configured for you and you shouldn't need to do anything. But if for some reason these are blank, you're going to need to click on these buttons over here and tell it where your Git installation files are. Hopefully you won't have to do that because it's going to be a little bit of a seek and find, but it will be there. One other thing too, this folder location is unique to Linux or Mac OS. So if yours is saying that it's located someplace other than what I have here, don't panic. If it's filled in, then it found the correct location on Windows. Okay, I'm going to press Save Repository. And you'll notice down here at the bottom, it quickly said saving the history. Okay, so at this point, we have a bunch of files here that have not been, that have recently been changed but are not actually up on our repository. And some of these never will go to our repository because our git ignore file that we created in part 1 on GitHub's webpage isn't going to allow some of those to go to the repository. They will simply be ignored. So let's do something meaningful here. I'm going to create just a basic little script over here. Don't worry, we won't do any scripting. We're just creating a file in Unity so that we can have some new data. And I'm going to right click and say create C# script. And I will say that this is my main character move script. There it is. I've created a new file. If this is easier for you to see, you can also, as you guys know, as Unity developers, you can change this and make it more visible. Okay, so I have a new script here. It's already been made. And what I can do at this point is you'll notice it has a green check mark next to it. That means there's been a change to the file, but maybe has not been quite updated on GitHub's repository. So if I take a look at this for a second, actually let's move over here for a second. I see that we have a lot of files here that need to commit, and this happens when you first created a Unity project, is that it has a couple of little files, a README file over on your GitHub repository, and then you have a bunch of changes on your local repository on your physical computer, and the two are not matching. So I'm just going to name this one initial commit there for a second, and then I'm going to select all of these files here and say commit to master. Now we're going to talk about branching in a minute. We typically don't want to put everything on the master. That's where the final project goes. We work safely in branches to prevent from messing up the main master project, but we'll talk about that in an upcoming video. Let's commit that to master. And what that is doing is that is pushing that over onto GitHub. Rather, the commit is putting it in the staging area so that it can be put onto a GitHub repository. So once we have done the committing, just go up there and press that push button. And that push button will actually put it over onto your GitHub repository. And this is a great time to stop and talk about what are the terms fetch, pull, push, refresh, and commit. Now I want to point out to you a problem that I just ran into while I was in pause mode here, and it comes up frequently. And then I looked on the forums online, and it is a very common problem where merging your local repository into your remote repository can cause some errors. Specifically, it says it cannot allow unrelated histories because the histories have not been aligned between the local repository and the remote repository. The history meaning past actions. So one of the commands that I tend to run here, and I only do this at the very beginning of connecting a local repository Unity project to a remote one, and that is this one right here. Get work tree equals period pull allow unrelated histories, and that's going to allow really essentially those two to merge together. Those of you that are more tech savvy with Git could probably walk through exactly what it does, but generally speaking, for what we're doing right now, that's where I'm going to leave it. At this point, you should now be able to push any of your initial commits. If you still have some items listed right here that need to be checked and have little green addition symbols next to them, that means that those need to be committed as well for staging to be sent to your remote repository so that both places are up to date. Once you do that and you go and you look at your repository online and you refresh, you should now see the README file we created. There's that git ignore file. We have the package manager from Unity, project settings, and then there's our all important assets folder that has those folders that we made in Unity. If we go into our scripts folder, what do you know? There is my CS file that we created. You can see there's the default code that's in any Unity script, C# script that you make. So we know that everything now is beginning to work. So I just want to point out while we're here some basic commands. One, a local repository is talking about the folder on your computer where the Unity files are being saved right now. You want to work in a local repository. One, it's going to be quicker than trying to work out of cloud storage. But two, it also allows you to work a little bit in isolation from your teammates so that you can test out ideas or concepts that you maybe have and then only commit them to the repository when you and your group are satisfied with your work. And we'll get more into that here shortly when we get into branches. So what are the terms commit, push, and then pull fetch? Well, commit means that you are ready to take files from your local repository and stage them for a potential push to a remote repository. What does that mean? Well, it means that you've made some changes you're satisfied with. You maybe aren't quite ready to back them up or, quote, push them from your local computer onto GitHub's repository for long-term saving and for backup. You're just making them ready. To use a baseball analogy, it's like putting your files in the on-deck circle, but you're not quite ready to go to home plate. You're not ready quite to make things go live and to back them up. That's really what commit is in a nutshell for beginners. What is pushing? Well, pushing is talking about taking those files that have been committed for long-term saving and actually taking the action of putting them onto your GitHub repository, taking them off of your computer or making a copy of them from your local computer and putting them into your GitHub repository. So what is a repository? Well, a repository is a fancy word for a place where all of the data from a project has been saved. So you have a local repository where you are working and everything is what you see in Unity. And then when you're ready to save it long term or to make it available for your team to be able to use in their local repositories, then you would push it onto your GitHub account. Okay, so then what is pull and fetch? And they're slightly different, but here for beginners, we're going to use them somewhat synonymously. Pulling is when you download data from your remote repository, so you're taking data off of GitHub's server where you backed it up at one point, and you're merging any commits from the currently tracked branch. So if someone on your team has decided that they've updated, I don't know, maybe it is the main controller script, they've updated, they're satisfied with it, and you're thinking, well, wait a second, if it's good enough for the project, I need to get a copy of it so that I can then begin to build my part of the project using their successfully built code. So we can actually go and pull any changes that any other teammates have made to the repository by using the pull command. So if we look over here, well, see, here's your fetch command, a button right there. There's your pull button. So if someone else in your team has put some code up there, either in the master branch or on another sub-project branch, then this pull button is probably going to have a parenthesis and a number after it, which talks about how many changes have been made to the project's online repository that you don't currently have. And that's going to be really important probably if someone has pushed changes up onto a GitHub repository and it's been approved by the supervisor of the GitHub repository, then you're probably going to want to pull those down to your local repository so that you are beginning to develop the game going forward given the latest updated code from your group. I hope that makes sense. When you are working in your local repository, you're basically getting a copy or a clone of whatever is online and putting it on your computer. If each one of your teammates does that, then you've essentially created multiple copies of the same game that are starting to become different throughout the workday. So when teammates begin to push their changes, approved changes onto the repository, you're going to want to get those changes at the end of the day, so when you come back the next day, you're working with the latest and greatest code. Okay, so then we move over to what the heck are branches. Well, in order to show you branches, I'm going to bring up Unity's documentation. Hopefully I still have it handy here. Here it is. And what this is going to show us is what the heck a branch is. So a branch is your ability to deviate away from the main team or the final product and work on your own in somewhat isolation. And this is referred to as a branch. Based on the amount of time I have left in this video, I'm going to pause here, and part 3 is where I will get back into talking about what are branches and what does it mean with GitHub to work in isolation from a team.